All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start this panel, Preparing the Forward Deployed Force to Meet the High-End Threats. I'm Bill Hamlet, the Editor-in-Chief of Proceedings at the U.S. Naval Institute. It's my pleasure to moderate today's panel, to introduce the speakers, and then eventually moderate your Q&A. So first, you'll notice the seating pattern here. This is blue-green integration at its best. We've got fleet commanders, and we've got MEF commanders and Navy Marine Corps integration. From my left, starting off with Lieutenant General Mike Cederholm, Commanding General, 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. General Cederholm assumed command of 1 MEF in February 2024, so just about a year ago. Wesleyan University graduate. He was commissioned and trained as a Marine pilot. He's commanded units in all 3 Marine Expeditionary Forces, including VMFA 212, MAG 31, 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing, and 1 MEF. General Cederholm has flown all Marine Corps operational aircraft, including the F-35B, the CH-53K, and VH-92, the new presidential helicopter. He deployed for Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, and also led Task Force Baltic Watchtower in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. To his left, Vice Admiral John Wayne, U.S. Navy Commander, 3rd Fleet, is a native of Port Washington, New York, graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy class of 1990, surface warfare officer. Admiral Wade has made multiple deployments for Operations Desert Storm, Southern Watch, Iraqi Freedom, and Enduring Freedom. He commanded a PC. I'm a big fan of, command early, command often. He commanded USS Firebolt, USS Preble, Destroyer Squadron 28, Carrier Strike Group 12 on board USS Abraham Lincoln, and he assumed command of 3rd Fleet in June of last year. To his left, Lieutenant General Calvert Worth, U.S. Marine Corps Commanding General, 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, native of St. Louis, Missouri. He graduated from University of Missouri-Columbia in 1989, commissioned through the Marine Corps Officer Candidates Course in 1991. He's held a variety of command and staff roles, including Rifle Platoon Commander, Battalion Adjutant, Company Commander, Battalion XO, and Commanding Officer of 1st Battalion, 6th Marines, and 6th Marine Regiment, and Special Purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force Crisis Response Africa. He also served as Commander of Task Force Southwest 20.1 in Afghanistan, Assistant Division Commander before commanding 2nd Marine Division from 2022 to 2024. In August of 2024, he assumed command of 2 MEF. And last up is Rear Admiral Joe Cahill, U.S. Navy Commander, Naval Surface Force Atlantic, native of Vermont, a 1992 graduate of the University of Maine, Maniac. Admiral Cahill is also a career surface warfare officer who commanded a PC. There's a trend here. He commanded USS Monsoon, PC-4, USS Preble, DDG-88, and USS Bunker Hill, CG-52, where he served as Integrated Air and Missile Warfare Commander for CSG-9. He later served as Commander Carrier Strike Group 15 here in San Diego, and he took command of Naval Surface Force Atlantic in June of 2023. So now I've got a couple questions to get this warmed up. Actually, first I'm going to start and give each of them an opportunity for an opening statement. Then I've got a couple questions while you all think of your questions. When it comes time for audience Q&A, please line up at one of the microphones. Let's stay away from politics. So if politics comes into any of the comments or questions, I'm just going to cut it off quickly. Just state your name and get to a question. No long soliloquies, just questions about warfighting and preparing the force for warfighting. So, General Cederholm, over to you, sir.
Hey, Bill. Thanks a lot. First of all, I'd like to give thanks to AVSEA and USNI for hosting this great forum where we can have an open, free dialogue, talk about the current opportunities and the future that lies off of our bow. Secondly, Bill, I'd like to thank you for trying to, rope these goats that are up here. And speaking of these goats, it's a pleasure and an honor to be amongst fellow warriors and longtime friends, and I look forward to our discussion today. So I have the humble privilege of serving as the commanding general of 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, about 44,133 as of this morning, Marines and sailors, and about 17,000 family members. We're distributed across 4 bases: Yuma, Miramar, Camp Pendleton, and 29 Palms. And at any one time, given time, we have about anywhere from 3,000 to 8,000 service members deployed across the international date line, doing our nation's bidding and supporting INDOPACOM's campaign plans with various OANIs that go year-round. So let me talk just a little quickly about, we've heard a lot about force design in the United States Marine Corps. I'm here to tell you that I take delivery of force design capabilities every day. It's my humble privilege to integrate those, and the good thing about that, and I welcome questions along any lines or any subject lines, but the good thing about that is that force design has now transitioned to bottom-up refinement. We've done the best thing we could possibly do. The great planning and programmatics has gone on at higher headquarters, but now we've put functions, capabilities, weapon systems in the hands of United States Marines, let them experiment with them, let them get familiar with that, find out where the gaps and seams are so we can go do our nation's bidding. So I'm excited to be here. I'm happy to go anywhere you want, except for any political issues. And I look forward to your questions. Thanks a lot.
All right.
All right, Admiral Wade.
Okay, thanks, homie. Can everyone hear me in the back? A lot of background noise. All right, well, as Bill highlighted, my name is Vice Admiral John Wade, Commander of 3rd Fleet. And as I was preparing for today, I realized my first AVSEA conference was 1995. I was a lieutenant, came down here from Naval Postgraduate School, and I was with Wayne Hughes, who wrote the book Fleet Tactics. And it's, apropos when I was thinking about tactics and training back then as a young lieutenant, tying into this panel where we're preparing for the high-end threats. Look, I'm just going to have a couple of comments here. I look forward to the dialogue. My experience as a flag officer, whether first as a Warfighting Development Center, through Strike Group, INDOPACOM J3, leader of a joint task force, it's become abundantly clear that the only constant in today's complex world is change. And, the character of warfare, as the panel before us, is changing right before our very eyes. Whether it's the range of sensors, the range and lethality of our weapon systems, integration of manned, unmanned, artificial intelligence, from space all the way to the seabed, everything in between, cyber, information, and it's happening fast. If you looked at the defense clips just today, Ukraine, Mediterranean, Black Sea, Red Sea, Western Pacific, the Baltic, it's global, okay? And it's really, really complex. As we prepare for the higher end threat, as Admiral Kaler highlighted today, it's an absolute imperative, right? That we've got to get after this. He wants it all. We got to move at speed. The new SecDef in his message to the force yesterday and his press conference highlighted the importance to increase lethality and the tactical proficiency of the force to deter and to ensure that we're ready to fight and win. And the CNO in her NAV plan, that's her focus with her P33 targets. You highlighted the force design with the Commandant, same thing. So when we think about this, when we're working to improve our lethality and tactical proficiency, I think you need to look at it temporally, a time stamp, not only today, but also in the future. In the future, it's chunks, it's near, mid, and far. Because in order to outpace and to increase our lethality at speed, today we've got to do it with the weapons, the sensors, the platforms, and the people that we have today. So we got to move at speed with high velocity learning, at the same time integrating the modernization efforts and simultaneously planning for the future, okay? And it's a very complex opportunity, and the way to get after this is .mil-PF. Okay, and for those of you who are not familiar, it's doctrine, it's organization, it's training, certification, it's the material, it's the leadership, education, personnel, facilities, and policy, and that's really, really hard. Really, really hard. And so me, as a 3rd Fleet commander, I plug into this .mil-PF ecosystem, and it's really important. And I do it in a number of ways. First of all, with training and certification. Second, it's with enabling the experimentation and piloting of new capabilities and the modernization efforts. And then it's also influencing everything else through the operations. And when I do it, I'm just going to share with you 4 things that I think about every day, and then I'll get off the stage and turn it off to Cal. The first one is what I call the Gortney rule. And I'm honored that Admiral Gortney just came in and sat down here, but he was the director of the Joint Staff when I was the deputy A for the chairman. And I had a lot of time with him. He provided a lot of mentorship. I see Admiral Kacher, he pulled us both aside all the time. Same with Homie here. But he would always say, whenever you're working a complex endeavor, or if there's a challenge that you're in charge of or you're part of, you got to look at the command and control or the C2. You got to look at the authorities, and you got to look at the process. C2, authorities, and process. Every job since I've had that guidance and that wisdom, he's absolutely right. So that's my lens every day at 3rd Fleet, keeping myself in a 3-point stance. What's the C2? What are the authorities? What's the process? And if it's not right, then saying something about it. Number 2 is, if you haven't read the book Team of Teams by Stanley McChrystal, I highly recommend it. But it resonates with me just because I played sports all my life. But in today's complex world, and honestly, we don't have similar C2 structures. There's a lot of supporting. You got to have cross-functional teams that can get after the gaps and the seams at speed, to get after speed of decision and speed of action. So I'm always thinking team of teams. And for those of you who know me in the audience here, I really believe it. You hear me say it all the time, but I say it to my team because are we being a team of teams? Are we helping? Are we doing all we can to support everybody? Because the imperative is to move at speed. And, Homie and I know each other for a long time. How many times do we call each other on the phone? It's a team of teams, right? So that's important. Third, the Mattis rule. If you look it up on Google, it's, General Mattis, then SecDef Mattis said, what information do you have? Who else needs to know it? Do they know it? Do they understand it? So at 3rd Fleet, that's what we're doing every day. Any type of email, any type of meeting. If we get something, if it's in our lane, we're going to act on it. If it's something that someone else should know, Admiral Kacher or Homie or Cal, we push it to them and then make sure that they understand it. Sometimes it's at speed to commander, but in order to be able to move at speed, sometimes we got to do it faster than our staffs. And then lastly, the CNO, it was Admiral Gilday first, and Admiral Franchetti talks about get real, get better. It's not a bumper sticker, okay? It's not just a slogan. It's really attacking the red. In other words, what isn't right? And then don't shy away from it. Embrace it. Go after it. For enterprise level, do root cause analysis, so we can get after the root causes and then attack it. But then at the junior level, it's just being excellent every day, taking ownership. If it isn't right, fix it. And if you can't fix it, push it up to the next supervisor. And that's what we're trying to do, inculcate that culture, again, so we can move at speed, so that we can achieve the higher force needs that are required for the higher end threat. So I look forward to your questions, and thanks for letting me share some of the thoughts from the 3rd Fleet perspective. Thank you.
All right. General Worth.
First and foremost, good afternoon. Thank you again to AFCEA for the opportunity to just say some words here and represent 2 MEF, the Expeditionary Force on the East Coast, the counterpart to Homie and his 1 MEF team. I would tell you that 3 MEF is not here, but in 2 MEF, what you have, a similar construct, a Marine Expeditionary Force that is focused at the Tri-COCOM area, meaning that Homie, 1 MEF, and 3 MEF focus against Indo-PACOM as the pacing contingency, the pacing threat. 2 MEF is the service-retained Marine Expeditionary Force for the Commandant. And what that means is that we focus on first EUCOM, then CENTCOM, and AFRICOM, while also providing support to SOUTHCOM when necessary and NORTHCOM when necessary. It's a large task, but our mission partners, as Homie partners and spends a lot of time with 7th Fleet, I spend a lot of time with 2nd Fleet and Doug Perry and his team, and 6th Fleet and Marvin Anderson out in the European theater. We are partnered. Naval integration is real every day for 2 MEF. What we do as a service-retained MEF, again, is provide combat-ready formations, which we also send into Indo-PACOM to become part of the stand-in formation in 3 MEF. We also stand and are tasked to be postured to respond to crisis. Again, being most ready when the nation is least ready, but be a crisis response option to the combatant commanders in that tri-COCOM area out of 2MEF. And then finally, we also serve and have trained to serve as a JTF capable headquarters. And that again is focused on EUCOM principally, but working with both Stuart Munch, Admiral Munch at URAF, Navy URAF, working with Marvin Anderson. We're also prepared to serve a role and play a role as a Joint Task Force capable headquarters in a NATO role, working with Doug Perry and his team as he responds to crisis. We are doing a lot out of 2MEF. Today, we have an opportunity to talk to you specifically about how, by warfighting function, whether that be command and control, whether that be fires, whether that be information and intelligence, or intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and the fires complex, we're prepared to answer questions on how we're addressing modernization, participating in the refinement to force design from the bottom, from the deck plate up, helping the commandant understand where he is today in force design implementation, where we might be tomorrow in force design, and therefore what requirements he needs to fight for inside the Beltway and with our industry partners to deliver capabilities that will make a difference. And when I say make a difference, that means maintain our asymmetric advantage with allies and partners. What I do know and what I can say, and I'll be willing to talk about today, is that I can tell you in EUCOM, our NATO allies are watching what it is we say with regard to joint all-domain command and control. There's an expectation that the United States and our maritime forces lead the way with regard to command and control in the maritime domain and in the littoral complex. Certainly in the high north, in the Baltics, in the Bosphorus, and now we've seen over the last year inside the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb, there are true missions and true requirements and capabilities that need to be delivered, not tomorrow, but today. And they need to be delivered at speed and at a density that is relevant to our warfighting capability. Prepared to entertain your questions today, prepared to provide you with some perspectives on a Marine Expeditionary Force that is not necessarily oriented at Indo-PACOM, but plays a distinct role inside the rest of the globe and with very, very important allies and partners that are watching what we do and how we conduct our business as a naval force. So, subject to your questions, look forward to the conversation today.
Thanks, Admiral Cahill.
Hey, so it's really great to see so many mentors, coaches, friends in the audience today. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation. So I'm the East Coast FG surface guy. And so my message coming out of today is I want you to know that we in the surface community are laser focused on building combat readiness. And that's super important. What that really means, and what I'll talk to you about for about 5 minutes, is how we as a community are on a cultural renovation journey, and we are learning at speed. The Red Sea has enabled us, and the Eastern Med has enabled us to take that term and to drive it with urgency. So we're doing a lot of understanding about what needs to be ready, when does it need to be ready, and what does it need to be ready to do as the changing character of war happens in front of us. For me, that really drives into, as a force generation builder, is warfighting, warfighters, and then that foundation piece. For me, across time, combat readiness, from a TICOM lens, has really been about 3 primary factors that I have the ability to influence as a teammate, to Admiral Wade's point on team of teams. That's in personnel, it's in material to include ordnance and logistics, and it's in training. Today in the surface community, that's enabled by our readiness operations centers, which are mirrored on our aviation teammates, ROCs as well, and that's across personnel, material, and training. At the operational level of war, it gives me as a TICOM using data to understand the status of the force, and then rapidly make changes across those three key lines of effort. In line of effort 1 for personnel, we are managing a lot of personnel risk right now. You have all have seen this from a recruiting perspective, and we are managing that as a TICOM by not taking risk forward with our forward operating forces, nor those that are getting ready to go. Our recruiting teammates have done a great job in 24 and brought in a difference between 23 was 50. We recruited 25,000 new accessions, and in 24 we recruited 40,000. We're laser focused on how we onboard those new teammates into our warships because they're now coming in the spring. And we're seeing these new teammates come at increasing numbers in scale. The other piece on this is warrior toughness. We've learned how to sustain operations while operating in the WES for extended periods of time for the last 14 months. Across over 200 offensive and 200 defensive engagements over the last 14 months, our warships have operated in the WES. And so that piece on warrior toughness that we've learned from our teammates in EOD and Navy Special Warfare, we've been able to apply that. And my message to you is the crews and sailors that man our warships for this nation are doing incredible work out there. They are tough, they are resilient, and they are warfighters operating forward on the edge. So, in the material line of effort, this is really about a shift from just-in-time logistics to just-in-case, and it's incredibly relevant in the Western Pacific. We now talk about find-to-fix timelines and driving down how we move those parts around. Our readiness operations centers have really driven that because we now have visibility into these systems, stakeholders, and processes that we can move at speed, much like an airline does, and much like our aviation brethren are doing. But that's not enough because warship redundancy is combat readiness. And we are moving out to drive redundancy risk out of the equation. The next step on this is to shift from this just-in-time logistics to just-in-case. So at ESH-1, we're investing significant amounts of resources in stocking out our warships with the right parts and the right technical capabilities so that we can sustain our forces operating in the WES in a contested logistics space. That's fundamentally different for us as a community, and it's new space, and I'm excited that we're working about it. Ordnance. For me, as a type commander, in many cases, I'm a logistician. I move combat potential around. In the ordnance piece in the last 2 years, we've gotten live reps and sets of how to reload our warships in the control area and execution. We're prototyping how to do that underway, and you've seen many things publicly where we're executing Tomahawk and Standard Missile reload prototypes at sea. That's an incredible enabler for our force in the Indo-Pacific. And the training line of effort, this is about a community journey to renovate. It began in 2014 with the stand-up of the Surface and Mine Warfighting Development Center. We've got Wilson Marks here and a number of Whitties in the audience right now. It is modeled on Top Gun, and we're 10 years in. You're seeing that investment that many of you made in that organization 10 years ago pay off in combat every single day. You're seeing tactical excellence by design as we execute multi-domain combat operations. So a little history. In 2014, when I was a plank owner at SMITIC, we had 4 lines of effort. Build Whitties, write TTP, teach the TTP, and then inform future capabilities. In 2014, we had 10 warfare tactics instructors. Today, we have 768. Then we had 0 Whitties on a warship. Today, 66% of our Whitties, 66% of our warships have warfare tactics instructors on them, and 21% of our XOs and COs on warships today are warfare tactics instructors, and we are on plan to execute the next step in the 10-year model of Top Gun. When I came in as the original N5, our average TTP was 17.5 years old. It was irrelevant. Our TTP today, written by Whitty's, is on average 2.5 years old. We think that that's about the right amount of time frame. In the teaching piece, we've implemented SWAT at scale, and we are now executing quarterly SWATs with training that replicates as realistic with LVC combat conditions in the theater that the teams are going to go operate in. The final piece is on forming future capabilities. Whitty's are now PCS'd into IWS and are working on future capabilities of the Aegis weapon system with the computer programmers and with industry. And we are learning. Red Sea, learning at speed. When I was a division officer, we used to pull tape after a live fire. And my entire career, up until we restarted live fire with a purpose with SMITIC, I shot one standard missile in my entire career over 20 years. Now, every single warship that goes out the door executes a live fire against a real representative threat that SMITIC is training to. Our folks have confidence in their kit, and they're moving out and they're executing business. From a tape standpoint, this learning is enabled by live fire with a purpose, LVC, and tape. That tape data extraction took on average 3 months. SMITIC is now doing that in the Red Sea in less than 48 hours. We're extracting the data to include voice tapes, internal and external. They're executing analysis and providing feedback to those that are operating forward. Those are getting ready to go in our schoolhouses and pipelines. Learning at speed. That's what we're executing as a community in a team of teams model with our aviation teammates, our information warfare teammates, and our submarine teammates. This learning at speed to enable us to fight and win with an urgency that I've never seen in my career and my community before. And we're doing this through a threat-based, risk-informed, data-enabled construct. And I look forward to the questions and conversations today. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So first question, and actually Admiral Cahill just covered a lot of this, I think, for the surface force, but I really want to hear about it from the Marine Corps perspective, because your responsibility in large part is preparing Marines and sailors and strike groups and Marine groups to deploy and get ready for combat operations, be prepared for combat operations. So how is the training evolving as you watch what's happening in the world, as our adversaries evolve their capabilities and bring more capabilities online? How is training in the Marine Corps, Third Fleet? Admiral Cahill, you already touched a lot of this. I'm hearing a lot about Whitty's. What's the Marine Corps equivalent of a WTI in the Navy? General Cederholm.
Well, thanks. And Cal, you can clean up the mess that I'm about ready to make. So thanks for the question. I think that, our training is constantly evolving. And if you look at our basic mandate, an immutable mandate for the United States Marine Corps is to be ready when our nation is least ready. So I think as you take a look at that, it's perhaps my most sacred obligation to the men and women that I have the privilege of serving at 1MEF to ensure that they're ready. How do you do that? Through a very detailed, oriented, constantly revising to meet the threat and the mission standards training that goes on. I think it's a lot. What keeps me up at night is probably, and I know you didn't think you'd hear uttered from a Marine Corps officer's mouth, a poem by Tecumseh, right? Tecumseh talks about, in this poem, about living your life. And there's a section in there that talks about when the moment comes, don't be like those who weep and beg for more time to live their lives differently. We don't have that luxury in the United States Marine Corps or in the United States Navy. When that call comes for the next fight, and the next fight is going to be nasty and it's going to be ugly, we better have taken the maximum amount of time, maximize our training time to do there. So John and I, our staffs, work constantly to improve and revise our certification process. I'd look at the recent addition to the COM2X certification process. It's now a 17-day evolution that takes into account real-world scenarios. And if you haven't seen the syllabus and all the injects that go on there, I mean, it is a hard problem set. Just like Joe talked about, training for real-world operations informs our constantly evolving training, evaluation, and certification process that goes on. So that's the thing that keeps me up the most at night, is ensuring that we've provided those opportunities at generating readiness. We've provided the proper safe training to put the Marines in a position to go answer our nation's call, and you'd be proud of them. Those 44,133 Marines and sailors, they're different. They're different than the generation you read about in the newspapers. They're smarter, they're stronger, they're faster than we were, and it's a humble privilege every day to serve with them and for them, and I have every trust and confidence that they'll be ready with their training and go out and win our next battle. Al.
So I will riff off of where Lieutenant General Cedarholm left off. I will tell you that principally the modality of delivering Marine Corps capabilities forward is generation of Marine expeditionary units and compositing those expeditionary units with an amphibious ready group. That forward presentation is the most flexible and responsive option for combat commanders. Forward position, sovereign U.S. territory, trained to the high end of the range of military operations, and also available and present for competition. So scaling from competition through crisis into contingency is simply what we do. Similarly, 1 MEF and 2 MEF have the responsibility of generating Marine expeditionary units. And with our naval counterparts, making sure that we put together integrated training that trains to the high end and to the true complexity of operations. 17-day COM2X on the West Coast, 15-day COM2X on the East Coast. We deliver our Marine expeditionary units into the EUCOM theater. And they will shoot through the Suez Canal and present themselves in the CENTCOM AOR. Just recently, over the last 2 years, our 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit was stretched and disaggregated, operating both in the Red Sea against the Houthis with 5th Fleet, while a single ship deployer, the Mesa Verde, was positioned in the Eastern Med and prepared to respond to crisis and conduct non-combatant evacuation operations in support of 6th Fleet, EUCOM in support of CENTCOM. That flexibility is something that we have a lot of sets and reps on over many, many years. Additionally, what's changing, what the demand signal now causes us to do is also work with our fleet counterparts in integrated battle problems, large-scale exercises, and ensure that as a naval force, Marines and sailors are prepared to work together in the high north, and we use steadfast series exercises or exercise like Atlantic Alliance to exercise, to train together, to make sure that we are truly integrated as a naval force, whether that means delivering Marines from amphibious platforms ashore or operating ashore as Marines go forward and seize and hold key maritime terrain and then hold at risk adversary formations in the maritime domain, operating in the littorals, conducting littoral operations in contested environment, conducting expeditionary advance-based operations. We can't do these things if we do not have a habitual relationship with our counterparts. These relationships are as healthy as I've seen them in my 33 years. We're working routinely with 2nd Fleet, and we work with Doug Perry routinely to make sure that under both of his hats, as a fleet commander and as a joint force commander inside of his NATO responsibilities, that he is prepared to respond to crisis, scale to contingency, and fight and win in the maritime domain. Similarly, inside of 6th Fleet, we work with Marvin Anderson and his team to ensure that the combatant commander has options in UCOM, and that training, therefore, needs to be real. The live, virtual, and constructive opportunities that must continue to be refined and delivered to the fleet so that we can train using our battle sim centers, using our live virtual constructive construct to train from Halifax all the way to Avon Park along the eastern seaboard. Those are requirements for training outside of large-scale exercises, outside of those gift-mapped exercises. We must train as we fight, and we are evolving very, very rapidly to ensure that industry and that our headquarters inside the Pentagon understand what the requirements are. Live, virtual, constructive, making sure that Navy sailors aboard amphibious shipping, Marines aboard amphibious shipping, and Marines and sailors ashore can operate seamlessly when called to respond. And so I would tell you that we've made great gains, and we could talk more specifically about what some of those gains are in your questions or additional comments. Thanks.
Thanks. I'll keep it quick. So your question was, how are we evolving training? And again, it goes to the temporal aspect. So if you're talking about today and how the character of warfare is changing, every operation at the operational level war down to the tactical level war is currently being assessed. Not only what's going well, but importantly, what's not going well. And then we inject that into either schoolhouse training, tactical bulletins, leveraging the warfighting development centers, and then getting the sets and reps and training. I mentioned Admiral Cacher and I. We talk all the time about his operations in 7th Fleet. What doesn't go well? How can I then incorporate it, work with the TICOMs for basic training, advanced, integrated, so we get those sailors the sets and reps that they need to become confident, competent, and proficient before they go out and deploy. Another force enabler is the LVC. We talked about it a lot, but again, going back to my sports analogy, it's about practice, sets and reps, right? Building that muscle memory. And you can stop the problem when something doesn't go right. You can do element training immediately and then get right back up and keep going after it. So that's important. At the operational level of war, not only in COM2X are we now fully integrated and joint, but Homie and I just participated in a my mock certification. Next week, we're doing a rehearsal, all joint, Air Force, Army, Marine, combination of physical, live, but also virtual constructive. So it's evolving. So that's today. In the future, as we bring modernization, as we bring new capabilities to the forefront, it's critical that we've got the .mil-PF process right. I would argue you could bring a platform out, but if that platform doesn't have the requisite training, doesn't have the TTP, doesn't have the life cycle management, it's worth nothing. And so that's the speed piece, and that's why process and C2 and authorities, the Gortney rule, has to be applied down and in, but then up and out across the joint, but also with our allies and partners. I'm not saying it's easy. This is hard, but there's push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups we got to do. And as Admiral Kaler and as the SecDef and the chairman and the CNO, the commandant, this is the year that we got to work this so that we're ready in the next couple of years.
So I'll just share a story with you. And as all of you know, sea stories are great, some of which are true. This one is actually true. And this is about how quickly we're learning, not just in the training, but I believe with our partners in industry. So Wilson Marks called me on a Friday night and said, we've got a problem with a specific baseline capability that's in the WES. And they were in the middle of a fight. I called Stem Maguez that night. Smitic had already built TTP as a workaround within about 48 hours. It was trained to by Witties. Lockheed Martin came in on the weekend and worked a patch. We fielded the patch that had been tested on a ship out at 3rd Fleet to verify that the patch worked. And 17 days later, we had an update to the Aegis weapon system that enabled that ship to fight in the WES. That's what we've got to do at speed. And that story about this team of teams and folks moving with urgency is now what we have to continue to stay laser focused on. And the piece for me is we can do it. It's been amazing what we can actually accomplish when we bring folks together as a team of teams.
So I want to pull the thread a little bit more on live, virtual, and constructive training. A couple of you mentioned it. Is there enough fidelity for individuals training on individual weapon systems all the way up to the maritime operations centers, integrated training across different warfare areas, for example, and even across the blue-green team? Do you feel like you've got the LVC capabilities that allow you to exercise the full spectrum of capabilities that your forces need to be able to train for combat operations? Start with General Cederholm.
The short answer is no, not yet. So I know from a Marine Corps perspective, and then I'll talk about the great integration that goes on between 1 MEF and 3rd Fleet. But from a Marine Corps perspective, Lieutenant General Iams put us on an LVC training continuum project in 2023, beginning in FY23. It is a 4-year march with 4 phases. Right now, we've just entered the integration phase of LVC for the Marine Corps. And then we will go into the beginning of 26, we go into global integration phase. So what we need to be able to do that we currently cannot do is we need to be able to rehearse and do operations across 3 things. Number 1, across all domains. Number 2, across all echelons. And number 3, across all functions. We're not there yet, but we have a very good plan with Project Tripoli that may have started with you, General Craparata, when you were sitting in the seat. So that's the Marine Corps' bid at LVC. I have the utmost trust and confidence. They've been on the glide slope since 23, delivering on the objectives and the wickets along the way. With regards to at the operational and tactical level, I know that we are starting to incorporate LVC into some of our big exercises. Bala-Catan 24, which is about 16,000 service members from across both the Armed Forces of the Philippines and United States service members across all services. Last year, we held the first live and constructive formations battle sim test. And this year, we will scale that up in Bala-Catan 25. It was kind of cutting edge. Also, as we do Steel Night back and forth, we just did Steel Night, which Com referred to. We did it in September or in December. And during the mock certification, during the workup and certification phase for our Marine Rotation Force Darwin, we also used some LVC cutting edge combat capabilities, both on the Navy and the Marine Corps side. So I'm excited at the opportunities that lie off the bow with LVC, but we're not there yet from a Marine Corps perspective.
Yeah, I would just echo that, where we are today compared to, 5 years ago when I was the Director of Maritime Operations of Fleet Forces, we're better. But we got to continue to make our progress. You asked about balance. I would say the surface fleet in the Navy is probably more advanced. We're getting better in aviation. We're also integrating at the operational level of war. We also need to transition with the unmanned. We're doing that a little bit. But as you look at unmanned man integration, that it's coming fast. So that's part of LVC. There's a difference between the East Coast and the West Coast. There's a number of factors for that, but there's a lot of money that's being put towards that. And then when I look at joint and our allies and partners, it's improving. Each exercise, everyone's putting money towards it, but there's still more to do to get those sets and reps across the joint force.
On the East Coast, I would tell you that over the last year, we have spent time working with the Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory and the Naval Information Warfare Center Atlantic, NIWAC-LANT, to improve the use of our programs of record systems, AFATIDS, JDOCS, C2S, all of our command and control architectures, those systems. We are training and working with our naval counterparts to ensure that as we sense and make sense of the environment, as we gain and maintain target quality tracks, we can pass that information seamlessly into the mock for prosecution of said targets. Or, in a broader sense, be able to hand off those targets that have been tracked and have the level of quality, those targets handed off to a joint force or allied partner for prosecution of targets. We're training time now on the Eastern Seaboard to make sure within our battle sim centers, working with EWTG LANT, and specifically as we generate MUs and ARG MUs, we're making sure that within the COM2Xs, we're challenging them, training with the systems so that they are proficient and confident that any sensor can in fact hand off track quality, target quality tracks to any shooter for prosecution. That is what we advertise in the maritime domain. We're training to that now, and we are leveraging live, virtual, and constructive constructs inside of, again, exercises like Atlantic Alliance. We are working routinely inside the ARG-MU certification process and outside of the ARG-MU certification process with both 2nd Fleet and 6th Fleet. But there's work to be done. There's user interface and there's feedback at the tactical edge for the individual user that needs to be improved. We need further integration of logistics challenges inside the live, virtual, and constructive. We tend to fairy dust and forward present formations without actually working through logistics in a contested environment and causing our logisticians to really work through what it means to conduct distributed operations in a maritime domain in a contested environment, where the adversary is going to confuse and frustrate your efforts to keep those distributed formations sustained. So we need to make sure that we're exercising in a way, and we build live, virtual, and constructive constructs to challenge ourselves a little bit more distinctly. And then, of course, there's just sharing of information, moving across the firewalls. What does it mean to be truly integrated in terms of our system of systems? This is a challenge. There's more work to be done. Live, virtual, and constructive will allow us to work the challenges, train as we will fight along the Eastern Seaboard, again, from Halifax to Avon Park, because that is exactly what we are going to be asked to do against a pacing threat or against a persistent and more evident and real threat when you look at the Russian problem set.
Yeah, can I just add, and then I'll give it over to you, Joe. For industry especially, I don't want to sugarcoat it. This is an East Coast, West Coast thing. It's not just plug and play very easy. There's some challenges. Configuration variance with all our weapons and sensors, ones and zeros don't necessarily translate to systems that were not built to be integrated. So there's a lot of Band-Aids. And so as we partner with industry, as we look to the future of LVC, we got to make it more plug and play, able to adapt and to be able to spiral in new sensors, new software, firmware, and hardware, because it makes it hard for those young sailors that are trying to get those sets and reps. So I don't want you to think that it's easy. It's hard, it's tough work, but we're getting after it.
So I think
Sir, before you go, I just want to get to audience Q&A. So while Admiral Cahill talks, if you've got a question, please come to one of the microphones and get ready to ask your questions. We've got about 10, 12 more minutes left. So Admiral, go ahead, and then we'll get to audience Q&A.
So I think back to what we've learned from the Red Sea and the Eastern Med over the last 14 months, and it's about all domain operations, about the value of the ARG-MU, it's about the value of the Carrier Strike Group, right? That is the bottom line, that are executing combat operations across all domains. So the piece for me is that LVC enables us to do rehearsals. And that's a key word that for me as a community guy, but as a former Carrier Strike Group 15 commander, we transitioned to rehearsals. And that is super important for us as we build cohesion at the unit level and then at the CSG and ARG-MU level. And so that cohesion that LVC enables is really, really important. And that not only is enabled when they're underway or at the pier, but the team comes together, for example, in the CSG, comes together in Fallon with a joint CSG, CVW, CVN, crew des team that does rehearsals that replicate not only the plan, but the combat conditions that these teammates are going to face. And so we have to scale it and continue to improve it. And I think that hope is important. And I think why I want to give you some hope here is when I relieved Admiral Wade on Preble, and we went through our basic phase and then advanced phase and integrated phase, we could keep our LVC up for about 3-ish hours, maybe. Today, when I was at CSG 15 last year and now on the East Coast to Admiral Wade's points, the air wing, the carrier, all of the crew des, they're in it 24/7 on the East Coast. And so at 02:30 in the morning, those sailors don't know that the LVC is or isn't on. And so we add an element of the unknown of combat, and we can pressurize them and do an actual rehearsal with a thinking adversary in an LVC environment, and that's gold.
Sergeant Major.
Sergeant Major Harkins, United States Marine Corps, retired. My question is going to bleed off on the Navy and then to the Marines. Start off with, we no longer have LSTs, landing ship tanks. We no longer have APAs, attack, personnel, and amphibious. The mission of the Marine Corps, as I understand it, is to secure advanced naval bases. I want to go back to the second MARDIV, 2MEF. Yes, we had Marines in the Eastern Pacific, in the Eastern Mediterranean to assist in evacuating civilians from Lebanon if it was necessary, about 4 months ago. It wasn't necessary. The last time we were in Lebanon was Ronald Reagan, and it went very, very poorly. So now what I want to go to is the nuts and bolts of the question here. The Navy, when I spoke with the CNO 2 years ago, did not want to advance any closer to land than 10 nautical miles. I want to know how the Marine Corps is going to fill in that 10 nautical miles in landing Marines in a wartime environment rather than a not wartime environment. Thank you.
I'll just start. Yeah. I think I'll start because I got to get the Marines there, right? So listen, just as we talked about, Sergeant Major, we live in a dangerous, complex, and a rapidly changing world. We don't have the luxury anymore to just take an ARG and move it from point A to point B and then to put it 10 miles offshore. There's threats all domain all the time. So that's where naval integration, joint force integration, coalition integration comes so that we can create that defensive in depth to be able to get us there and then to protect what we're doing. Now, we have the ability to go ashore and power project with our Marine Corps many different ways from many years ago. Our Ospreys with our air. We've got different landing craft. We're practicing that all the time. But we don't have domain guarantee and superiority. We might have to fight our way in, and then we have to stay there, and that's what we're practicing right now. It's hard, but that's why this integration, this teamwork here is so critically important, whether it's in the Middle East, which is a different fight compared to what we would see in the South China Sea or somewhere in the Western Pacific. So it's a range of capabilities and skill sets that are hard, and that's what we're working every day.
Sergeant Major, again, thank you for your question. I would tell you that I'm not sure if there is a prohibition upon how close our naval counterparts are willing to get to shoreline. I don't know that we're going to allow any adversary to cause us to stay outside of an area that we know is going to be challenging, we know is going to be rife with threats. But I'll just stay in the Marine Corps business. The Commandant right now is pursuing the solution for connectivity, connectors specifically, whether that be landing ship medium, whether that be going out and purchasing LCUs, LCU 2000s, to make sure that we have the connectors necessary to deliver amphibious capability ashore. Forcible entry simply looks different. It's going to be different than it was when I started 30 years ago, and that's just change. My problem as commander is to engineer the unfair fight with our naval counterparts. As we close on the shoreline, if in the event we have to conduct forcible entry, then the solutions and the challenges are there, but the solutions will have to be different. How we close in the objective area, how we use naval surface fires, how we use aviation fires to eliminate a hardened position ashore so that we can effect and deliver Marine Corps formations. We have options. We have ranges in the Osprey. We have long-range precision munitions that change the calculus and maybe change what it is either one of us would have thought forcible entry might look like 30 years ago or 40 years ago. I won't date you, Sergeant Major. But as things change, we, the 3 stars, the commanders, have to deliver that unfair fight. That means I need to close on that objective from 50 kilometers, 25 kilometers to 15 kilometers, rather than think about a very tactical last 300 meters. We engineer the unfair fight. We have an asymmetric advantage. We're not alone. We can still get ashore. We can still force our way ashore. It will simply look different, okay? And that's what I can tell you. For connectors, we're working those very tactical and operational problems to make sure that we can deliver Marines ashore when the time comes. Commandant has that high on his priority list, and he's working with Admiral Franchetti to solve that connector issue time now. But we have partners in our naval formation.
So if I can, I just want to give you a sense of what I would call an awakening on this Navy Marine Corps team. And it's on the Navy side. And I think it's a good awakening to your point. So we recognize in the Eastern Med associated with that ARG, the WASP ARG MU that executed tremendous operations for the nation over the last 7 months, that I, as a destroyer CO, I did a SWAT with other destroyers, and then I did a Comp2X with my carrier strike group. Well, I can tell you that for the Iwo Jima, that SWAT that we're going to do here for that ARG MU, we're integrating 3 destroyers into it because of just what you said, because we recognize that the sea control area and the sea denial area and that deny control line is moving based on the threat. And so we're now, what I would say is returning to what I think is an 80s construct back to Wayne Hughes, where we are applying a threat-based, risk-informed, data-enabled approach, even in how we're training destroyer captains to integrate with the ARG MU. And as a destroyer and cruiser CO, we never did that in my last 15 or 20 years here. So I think that's an important piece that I'm seeing movement that I never experienced as a younger officer.
All right, we got time for one more question. Sir, over here.
For the Marines to get ashore and to be supplied, I think we also need to think about the threat of mines. In Wonsan in 1950 and then 40 years later off the coast of Kuwait, mines were effective, keeping Marines from landing where they wanted to go. Where are we in our mine hunting capabilities, which I think atrophied somewhat after the end of the Cold War? And what capabilities would you like to see by 2027 that you don't have today yet to accomplish your mission?
Yeah, thanks for your question. When I was the Surface and Mine Warfighting Development Center, I say surface and mine warfighting, I learned a lot about mine warfare. Just the threat of mines in the water changes the calculus strategically, operationally, and tactically. Yes, we've got some mine hunting, mine clearance challenges for the U.S. Navy, but I'd just like to highlight that we have enhanced capacity with our allies and partners, okay? We're also transitioning to the LCS, Littoral Combat Ship Mine Mission Package. Hey, call a spade. There's been some challenges, but we have turned the corner. And the first 3 LCS mission packages will be deploying to the 5th Fleet AOR here this spring to finally allow our old MCMs to decommission, bring a new capability. So there's more work to be done. Also, from an organizational structure, again, getting after .mil PF, the Navy has made the decision to split mining, offensive and defensive, to now lead that into the submarine force. So that's a decision that's been made to split that up, capabilities to bring to bear, and then it's also joint capabilities that you're probably well aware of from a tactical air, strategic air capability, and some others that we're testing and exploring with experimentation. So it's important. I know that our competitors view mining and mine warfare as important. We've got to take it as a real threat. And I don't know if you want to talk about the shore aspect in this. It's a challenge, for sure.
Yeah. With regard to mines, obviously I'll defer to the Navy with regard to in the sea echelon, how they'll deal with that particular threat. For the Marine Corps and the delivery of Marine formations ashore, there are options. Again, the sea echelon, if denied, if frustrated by a mine or sensor effort that is intended to deny space or access, then the Marine Corps simply goes back to its roots, seizing key maritime terrain in order to facilitate maneuver. That could mean a fires expeditionary advanced base. It could mean a sensing expeditionary advanced base. It could mean simply moving and conducting a deep operational maneuver that moves around or over a denied space. That is exactly what the Marine Corps is designed to do. That is what our force design modernization efforts are intended to provide, a force with flexibility. So yes, the adversary is going to attempt to deny terrain. And particularly in the sea echelon, that might take many different forms. But you have options. Reach and proximity can be overcome with the delivery of platforms, well, through the delivery of marine formations using some of our platforms with extended reach, and then leveraging extended range munitions such as Navy strike missile, long range precision fires, and HIMARS. There are options to the commander. Homie?
Oh, I think you said it well.
All right, we are out of time. I want to thank our panelists for their time today and their insights and all they do to prepare sailors and Marines for combat and for deployments around the world. I want to thank you, the audience, for your attention and your being here and also your questions today. To thank our members, we have a small gift from the Naval Institute Press book, Countering China's Great Game, A Strategy for American Dominance by Michael Sobolik. Please join me in a round of applause for our panelists. And before you leave today, be sure to go into the West app and provide your thoughts and your comments on the conversation that we've had. Once again, thank you very much.